Welcome to another episode of Steelers Latest with your host, Jason Nazario, a.k.a. J Reels, as we chronicle the Pittsburgh Steelers through training camp, preseason, and leading up to the season opener, which is 3 weeks from this coming Sunday, if you can believe. But I want to start off with the announcement that was made by Coach Mike McCarthy saying that he's going to have both Will Howard and Drew Aller each get a half in the upcoming preseason game this Friday against the New York Jets, which is going to be very interesting to see how this is going to unfold. And obviously, I'll get to both quarterbacks momentarily, but I wanted just to start off here by discussing the possibilities of having the sixth-round pick from last year's draft there from Ohio State getting a big opportunity. And we know Drew Aller was the third pick by the Steelers this year out of Penn State. Two guys that know their way around winning programs, that have had big-time success in the past. We know Will Howard winning a national championship, and Drew Aller, of course, having very good runs there at Penn State, although he fell short of trying to get to a championship and winning it all for the first time in forever. But to me, this is going to be a golden opportunity for the Steeler fan. Now, the big question is going to be, what is Aaron Glenn and the Jets going to do as far as deploying, more so in the first half than the second? But how long will the first teamers get a shot here? Or will the first teamers even suit up? That we'll have to wait and see, because that's going to be indicative, especially more so for Howard, on whether or not he's going to be able to read certain coverages, or if the Jets are going to not necessarily throw everything in the kitchen sink. It is preseason, but maybe give Will Howard a different look than he would normally see when he's looking at second and third stringers. So that's one thing that we're going to see early on, especially in that first half, whether or not the first teamer is going to come out for the Jets, to where Will Howard's really going to have his head on a swivel to see, all right, what am I going to face here? And not to say that there'll be anything different with second and third teamers, because remember, those guys are trying to make the team as well. But you'd have maybe a little bit of an ease and not really have to really worry, knowing that you're not going to face the top defensive players there for the Jets when he's under center there come Friday night. And that's the one advantage that Drew Aller will have, because we would think when he gets the first snap under center in the second half, he's probably going to face second, if not third teamers, or guys that may not even be in the league after the game there come Friday night. So you have to look at that as an advantage, more so for Aller than it is for Howard, which is going to lead to the final topic that you see there on the screen. And that's going to be fascinating to see, because again, can we base their performances on who they're going to play against here? And we understand it's still NFL talent. There's still players that are hungry to try to get a roster spot, to try to get in the league. We understand that. But really, in the grand scheme of things, we could micromanage and we could try to scrutinize as much as we possibly can. But we can only hope that these guys, even if they play me on the Jets, if I happen to be playing safety or corner or a D lineman, I'm sure they're still going to look at it and say, well, hey, the guy's trying to fight for a job. He's trying to get into the league. He's trying to get himself situated with a spot of one of the final 53. So you know what? That's the tack that I would take, even though it may not be against their big-time competition, or it may not be against their first stringers. So therefore, it could be a scenario where the numbers could be inflated, or it could be a situation where the team or the defense was more in prevent. That we'll have to wait and see if we watch the game or when we watch it. But that's one thing that we'll have to keep an eye on. Now let me get to Will Howard. We know there's a big opportunity for him. Now, sixth-round pick, we understand, very late, even though with his pedigree, where he came from, what he did in college, well, that was 2 years ago, and nobody really cares. He's in the pros now. He's trying to get himself in a position where he could be the third-string quarterback on the Pittsburgh Steelers. But here's what I'm looking at if I'm a fan, well, not if, I am a fan, of watching Howard here come Friday night. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's first team, second team, third stringers, you got me going in there, it doesn't matter. But this is going to be a big opportunity, because if he's going to go up against any one of those type of defenses where he's going to see personnel that, oh, geez, they're going to start week one in the NFL, or guys that are probably not even going to be in the league, he's got to take this opportunity, seize it as best as he possibly can, and even pick up from where he left off last week when he was very efficient there in the opener as far as the preseason goes with the Packers. And Howard, we know he's a big kid. What is he, 6'4", about 230? So he should be able to oversee what's happened there at the line of scrimmage, whether he's got guys crossing in front of him, whether he's got guys that are going to go deep. Chances are we may not see either DK Metcalf or Michael Pittman as they're trying to go through a couple of injuries there in camp. But how I see it here is Howard really has to not only just seize the opportunity, but take the bull by the horns and really show the coaching staff that they're going to have to think long and hard on whether or not he's going to be not only just the third string quarterback, but maybe a guy that they can even look for down the road in the future. You got to look at it that way, because after Aaron Rodgers exit stage left at the end of the year, is the Steeler quarterback currently on this roster right now. And Will Howard has an opportunity to at least show for 1 week and maybe 2 weeks, considering last week was successful for him, but whether or not he could be that guy moving forward. And how I see it is that he's going to have to go out there and be just as efficient. I'm sure the game plan is going to be tidy. They're not going to ask him to do too much, and maybe they'll take a couple of shots depending on what type of personnel the Jets put out there, especially in the opening couple of series. So if it's a thing where he's going to see second teamers, I'm sure maybe they'll take a shot downfield. And I understand that the Steelers aren't going to be whole. You're not going to see those big targets out there. Maybe Pat Freiermuth, I don't know. Does he get a series here, considering that Metcalf and Pittman aren't going to play? That we'll have to wait and see. But how I'm looking at it here for Howard, this is going to be a primo opportunity for him to do some big things. And I don't care who it's against. So if you're a Steeler fan, whether you're rooting more for Howard, whether you're rooting more for Aller, if you're a Big Ten guy and you're in the state of Pennsylvania, maybe you're rooting a little bit more for Drew Allen. I'm going to get to him next. But for Howard, again, I don't know how much more of an opportunity he's going to get here, because you would think in the final preseason game, which will be up in Buffalo the week after, you're probably going to see Aaron Rodgers play at least a couple of series, and then you're probably going to see Mason Rudolph finish out the half, and then the second half is going to be, I would think, a battle between Will Howard and Drew Aller. That's how I see the third preseason game, and we'll have to wait and see what McCarthy's going to do at that point. I know Rodgers, he's probably going to get under center for a couple of series, and then Mason Rudolph, you think, is going to also get some burn to tune up for the regular season. But that's the situation with Howard. To me, it's cut and dry. And obviously, if he doesn't play well and Aller does, that could be a tick for Howard that's going to be below, as far as him maybe not even making it as a third-string quarterback. So very important game for him. Very important game for him to see if he can stand out and certainly pick up from where he left off in the game last week against the Green Bay Packers. All right, now the next thing I want to talk about here is Kalshi. And Kalshi is important here, a very interesting partnership that we have with Kalshi. And if you're not familiar with them, well, you're about to be a little bit familiar with them now as I pull up my little read here when it comes to Kalshi. Now, before the season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions. Even yours truly. You know, who wins the division, who makes the playoffs, who's lifting the trophy at season's end. On Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you could trade those predictions in a live market. And as I've been saying here over the last couple of days, I like the over-unders. I'm not a betting guy, but I usually like to have fun with that on my own deal, but that's a whole separate deal. When it comes to a team that is going to win 8.5 games, and that's what the Steelers, at least that's what Vegas has for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. Now, they're currently trading, their probability is at -115 if you take the over. Meaning that a $100 trade will pay out $115. All right, that may not sound like a lot, but if you think that the Steelers aren't going to get to 8.5, that they're going to be under, that payout could be anywhere between +120 to +140. So maybe there's some out there, hopefully not the Steelers fans that are watching, that may go that route. Well, the bottom line is this. That's what the meaning of the $100 trade is going to pay out. So if you take the Steelers as an over and they're at -115, that's what your payout is going to be. So on Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. Trade the draft pick, the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app and use code FANARCHFOOTBALL to get $10 when you trade $10. And you see it right there on screen, KALSHI, Kalshi, trade on anything. 18 and over only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. All right, now to get back to the last couple of topics here. And for Drew Aller, this is obviously another opportunity for him to shine, considering he could pick up from where he left off last week, similar to what Will Howard did in the game against Green Bay. But here's the one thing I'm going to be curious to see. It's a situation where he's going to come in the second half. I'm sure the Jets are probably going to play, who knows, maybe even third stringers at that point. So can he back up that first game that we saw there where I believe off the top of my head, what was he, 10 for 13, 150 some odd yards. He had 3 total touchdowns, 2 in the air, 1 running. If he comes anything close to that, that's going to be something that you're going to build off on, especially the coaching staff and even more so as a fan. And all right, the competition and Jay Reels, come on, it's only preseason. Let me see them do this against a big-time defense, or let me see them do this in a regular season. And those are all valid points. But Aller is a guy that a lot of people thought could have been a high draft pick, could have maybe been a first-round pick if he had better success there, not only not last year, in his penultimate year in college, but last year, obviously, he had the injury, which curtailed the season. But let's say if he played out the whole year, and he probably would have been maybe a late first round, early to mid second round pick. And as we saw, he was a third round pick. So for Aller, who is big in his own right, he's even bigger than Howard. He's 6'5", about almost 225, 228. And I look at him as maybe like a mini Josh Allen. And not to say he's going to be Josh Allen, but how I see it is for Aller, if he can go out there and duplicate or at least come close to what he did there in the first game. I'm not expecting 3 total touchdowns. I'm not expecting a situation where he's going to go in there and perform and turn the lights out, where you're going to think like, oh my God, is this guy going to be the quarterback of the future? And this is what the fascinating narrative is going to be between these two guys, because they're going to be tied at the hip until it just so happens to be come at the end of training camp, will the Steelers carry 4 quarterbacks? And I mentioned that in the quarterback segment about a week and a half ago. So for Aller, how I see it is just a matter of growth. It's just a matter of just taking that opportunity and trying to capitalize on it. And that's it. And how I also see it with Aller, knowing that he's going to get a lot of reps here in this game, and this is probably going to be the showcase game, because who knows what's going to happen there in game number 3 against the Bills in their final postseason game. Maybe he's going to get the fourth quarter. Who knows? Maybe he gets more than that. That we'll have to wait and see. But that's still another 8 or 9 days away, where right now he has for sure the game on Friday night, second half against the Jets. It's all his for everybody to see in Acrisure Stadium. So the fans are going to be with their radar up to see whether or not Aller could have a carbon copy type game, or at least something close to it, than he had there in the game against the Packers. So all that adds up between the quarterback battle in the first segment, the second one with Will Howard, the third obviously with Aller, and then last but not least, which is going to be even more fascinating, is the pressure. And who's going to be able to withstand any pressure, who's got the most to lose. I know it's tough to bank this all on one preseason game, the second game, and one more time. I know I sound like a broken record here. We don't know what the Jets are going to do here defensively. And right, you would think Aller would have maybe a bit more of an advantage, considering that Howard may face a first-team defense, where Aller will not do that. He may face third stringers at that point. So that's going to be a big advantage to Aller. And you know what? If that is going to be the case, there may be more pressure on Aller to deliver than on Howard. Because let's just say, for argument's sake, Howard gets off to a little bit of a slow start, overthrows a pass, faces the rush, makes a quick read, or let's say he checks down, but the play gets stuffed there, not a big gain, etc., where Howard, all right, maybe wasn't terrible, but wasn't great, and then Aller goes in there, and like I said, either lights up the scoreboard against the third stringers, or worse, he gets lit up by the defense, where he gets tipped picks, or he just has a bad fumble, or even worse, overthrows somebody, where guys in center field gets him picked off. I mean, who knows what's going to happen here? But to me, although it's probably a little bit presumptuous to say who's got the most to lose, you would have to say right now it would probably be Aller, because he's probably going to face against, I don't want to go as far as saying inferior competition, but he's probably not going to go up against the first or even second stringers for that matter. He may be going up against literally guys that are going to be cut, as I mentioned there about 10 minutes ago. And I think he probably has more pressure. And considering the game he had prior, where he did have 3 total touchdowns, I'm sure the fans are going to think, well, hey, if he got 3 total touchdowns against the Packers, second and third stringers, what is he going to do against the Jets? Anything less than that could be a detriment to Aller maybe getting a third string opportunity. But how I see it is, at the end of the day, I don't think any of these guys have the most to lose unless they just literally cough it up. And I understand it's hard to gauge. And it's interesting because about 2 hours west in Cleveland, when you look at a guy like Shedeur Sanders, where a lot is expected out of him just based on his last name alone, and considering he was drafted a round before Will Howard in the draft last year, to me, how I see it is that although Howard may have more to lose, Aller may have more to lose, but I think Howard has more to gain here. So even though you see the question there at the bottom, I think Howard has more to gain, because if he does well against first team against first teamers and even second teamers for that matter, and knowing that he could have a leg up here in this competition between he and Aller, I believe that's the one he has more to gain in that response, in that regard, where the response by Aller could be more to lose based on everything that I just indicated. Now, how do you feel about that? Do you think Aller has more to lose? Do you think Howard has more to gain? Do you think both of these guys are under big-time pressure here to deliver, to see whether or not they're going to be the third-string quarterback? Who knows if they may even end up on a taxi squad? I think they're going to take 4 quarterbacks at the end of the day, but that's why we have that comment box in the description below. So please, if you want more Steeler content on a day-in, day-out basis, this is the channel for you. Please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Thanks so much for stopping by, getting your Steeler fix here with yours truly, Jay Reels, here on Steelers Latest. And until the next video, on the flip.